We're looking at an emerging tuberculosis disaster in the Torres Strait, and next week's really important because we will see the last of those visits by Australian clinicians to the islands of Saibai and Boigu. The great issue with TB is that it is infectious, and that there are up to 50,000 movements between PNG and Torres Strait Islands every year. So it's very important to have a clinical presence. I'm really disappointed that Queensland Health has, together with the Prime Minister, agreed to drop these clinics in this fanciful notion that AusAID can pick up the slack on the other side of Torres Strait. The reality is the promises that were made in October have not been met. The promise to have an imminent purchase of a tuberculosis vessel has not yet occurred. And it is clear that Papua New Guinea can't mount a serious TB response. It's obviously asking way too much for a health economy, number 164 in the world, to do something like that, and to be turning away TB patients who come across that strait is the next reality. So I'm asking the federal government, are they satisfied that Australians are safe from the infection of TB that moves in from PNG? Is the government satisfied that PNG patients who turn up in desperation will be treated and not turned away inappropriately and lead to unnecessary deaths? We have the ability, if it was a person of another nationality with tuberculosis, they would be immediately retrieved and given top-class care. But to turn away PNG patients for no other reason than penny pinching is simply inadequate. And we will have a resolution before Parliament voted on today, or at least considered. I hope that is passed. I hope there is a chance to again talk to the Premier, in fact both sides of Queensland politics, to make sure that these vital clinics continue. It's a fortnightly visit by a nurse, it's a 6-weekly visit by a TB specialist. You cannot expect Papua New Guinea to contact trace, to find index cases, and to work out the highly complex TB treatments that are required to avoid antibiotic resistance, which can lead actually to untreatable TB.
So what about Campbell Newman? What's his position on this?
Well, his position should be to continue the drug provision side of TB care, which obviously falls with the Queensland Government and is part of their forward estimates. But it really is the federal government that made this decision. Their notion that they can shift it across and rely on AusAID, I think, is fanciful. And don't forget also that the trips up there are actually funded by the federal government, potentially through the MSOAP program. So we're simply asking for that to continue under the existing arrangements.
Do you think this is a priority for the government?
I think biosurveillance should be a priority for all governments, and particularly that this is probably the two closest economies in the world with such a health gap. We do need to make arrangements for that. We need to both protect our citizens, but we also need to, morally, if people arrive, we need to look after nationals and where they come from and give them health care. We've seen that in other sectors already, such as refugee arrivals. And then we need to make sure that we find arrangements that PNG can improve its health system, but it can't do that in 6 months.
But maybe the government, the Commonwealth, could afford it if they get their changes to the PHR rebate through.
In fact, they're already funded because we have an MSOAP scheme to fund it, and the trips up there are between $3,000 and $12,000 a visit. So we are talking about a relatively small investment to have biosurveillance. On other matters, in dentistry, of course, there will be significant discussions today with the ADA visiting the building, and it needs to be remembered that the Howard government introduced the chronic disease dental scheme. 750,000 people have benefited from that. And if the definition of dental care is focusing on the 30% who most need it, then that scheme was excellently designed for seniors and has provided up to, on average, $2,500 worth of dental care. And it really is important to never forget that this federal government has tried since the day it was elected to dismantle this scheme and more ominously threaten dentists who intend to carry out this work, that the scheme may disappear and they may not be remunerated. And we think that shows the true heart of this government in its attitude to dentistry.